On November 18th, 1927, after serving 2 years and 9 months, Garvey was pardoned by President Calvin Coolidge. But he was ordered immediately deported. He was put on board the SS Saramacca, a ship owned by United Fruit, the same company on whose Costa Rican plantation he had worked as a young man. It was announced that Garvey would sail back to Jamaica from the port of New Orleans.
It was a Monday morning in November, a cold, drizzly, damp November New Orleans morning. It was more like a Mardi Gras day in New Orleans on that particular day. Going out to see Marcus Garvey on this ship. I imagine the conductors got tired of asking for fares, so some people rode for nothing. And the fare was only 7 cents. And they were just packed on top of each other on the streetcar going out to the riverfront.
And everybody went out with their children, everybody just to get that glimpse of him as the ship would leave. And the people could stand on the levee and stand close to the river. And, you know, they were for miles around, for about the people.
Mr. Garvey was not allowed to land. He had to stay on board ship. He did not put his foot on land. And he spoke to the people, bidding them farewell and wishing them well and asking them to hold on, keep the fort. As the ship was moving out from the docks, the people on shore was singing the President General's hymn. One God, our firm endeavor, one aim most glorious spent, one destiny forever. God bless our President.
We saw waving, we saw him do that with a handkerchief or something. But the people in general, they just was waving. Waving, 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 and crying and waving, crying and waving.
And the waves appeared to have been in harmony with the song as the people were singing, and the boat was moving out to sea.
They felt they was losing their father. Somebody so close to them, or losing themselves. What are we gonna do?
And my mother said until the day she died, she would not forget the sight of Garvey waving that white handkerchief as far as she could see the boat.
Back in Jamaica, Garvey received a hero's welcome. He and Amy Jakes Garvey settled in Kingston and had 2 sons. He tried his hand at elective office, real estate, an amusement park, a collection agency, and a newspaper. But when an American court took title to his personal assets and all UNIA property from New York to Kingston, Garvey was forced to declare bankruptcy.
Garvey was now a person who had come down in the world. And Garvey would be followed by children on the street, and they would heckle him, and Garvey felt very humiliated by this.
Garvey relocated to London in 1935. For a time, he had regular speaking engagements and managed to publish a newspaper. A handful of UNIA members, including Jacob Mills, migrated to Liberia on their own. But without Garvey's strong hand, his hundreds of thousands of followers in the United States dwindled to a small band of the faithful.
The men folk, if they had your names and everything, and you are a member of the UNIA, you'd lose your job. So you had to meet in disguise. That was one of the reasons why the Garvey movement was so thorough in being broke up. You couldn't say, I'm a UNIA member, I'm Marcus Garvey. You whispered it, Marcus Garvey. You could not speak his name.
Garvey was alone in London. The asthma and heart disease that had plagued him in prison began to worsen.
Garvey had a stroke in January of 1940, and he becomes incapacitated. George Padmore, who was a columnist for the Chicago Defender, had heard a rumor that Garvey had died, and instead of confirming this, he published a premature obituary.
The obituary described Garvey as a man whose followers had deserted him, a man who died broke, alone, and unpopular.
When Garvey reads it, he lets out a loud moan and he collapses. He suffers a second stroke. And next morning, he dies.
The date was June 10th, 1940. Marcus Garvey died a forgotten man. But his vision of Africa would influence future generations of what he called the beloved and scattered millions of the Negro race. When Garvey's passionate ideas about black pride and independence finally took hold, he would be revered by many as a prophet and a saint.
In death, I shall be a terror to the foes of Negro liberty. Look for me in the whirlwind or the song of the storm. Look for me all around you.
In his 53 years, Marcus Garvey never set foot in Africa.
I dreamed a dream that he came and I saw him. And he said to me, Barnes, do not be worried, for everything is working according to plan. I am not dead. I am only sleeping.
The organization left the legacy of I am. Simply, I am. With no apology. I am. We had never had that up to that time. We belonged to churches where we sang, but Garvey made you stand tall and quiet, looking into the future. And that's a great legacy.